thing. But
Yeah,
regardless, look, Mark, I turned this apple the other day, but guess what? Let's talk about life, the universe, and everything in existence.
we can do that.
Look, and by the way, look, the apple that I turned on a wooden machine. Um,
Wait. You turned that on a wooden machine?
Wood turning machine.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant the machine itself was made of wood.
I skipped one word. Are we in? Oh, are we on trial now, or what's going on? Huh? So what's going on, Mark?
Oh man, I love it. I love when we interrupt a backstage discussion we're having and it's done. Okay, I'm pushing the button, push the button, and then dead silence, and we got to come up with okay. Hi, how's the weather in Florida? You know.
Oh yeah. Well, we don't want any of that. I can just answer that by saying blistering. Next.
It's Oregon. If you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes, it'll change.
So look, I have one for you.
Okay.
And I don't know, since you are on the West Coast, I
Okay.
don't know that you don't know this, but I came across it for the first time, and I found it incredibly interesting. This whole story.
Okay.
So, going back in history, in the time of exploration, there are islands called I guess they're called the Channel Islands.
Okay.
Off the coast of California.
Right.
And back in the 1800s, you had this 1800s. Back in the 1500s, you had the Spanish traveling the oceans and discovering and whatnot. They came across a island,
Right.
and let me see if I can recall this, because I came across this documentary and I think it's so awesome. I think it's called the Island of Nicholas or something to that effect. They found that there were people living there. They found that, oh, look at these people. There was knowledge of it going back into the 1500s when the Spanish were traveling up and down. And by the way, I didn't know about West Coast Spanish exploration, but
oh yeah,
I do now. I thought it was. I really never paid attention to the West Coast necessarily. But through time, I think it was a certain group of explorers. There were Russian explorers that came through and saw a tribe there and whatnot. At one point, another group, I think that there were British, comes there, and in the 1800s, and these people that were living there, indigenous people on that island, were taken away to another island because of lack of food, some sort of issue, sickness or whatnot, and they thought they had taken everybody away. Okay. It wasn't until a Spanish explorer then came around back again, because a priest had heard about there being people there, and there were sightings of a lone lady, and people exploring. They could find no one there, but eventually they come to that island and they find tracks, and the explorers are traveling and following the tracks. They knew they weren't explorer tracks because they were barefoot tracks, and all the people that they had boots, until they came to this hut made out of whale bones and covered with thatch. There was a lady sitting in there, an indigenous lady, peeling blubber and preparing food. And they were like, what? They couldn't understand her, obviously. Mm-hmm. And she couldn't understand them. But they hand signal gestured, and they basically said, you want to come with us or do you want to stay here? And so they were actually cool. We usually think about these explorers coming through and butchering and all these things that we hear, but actual history is more specific, and individuals are actually more specific. So anyhow, they took the lady to an island where her original people some 50 years ago were at now, and Christianized and stuff. And they gave her a new name, which was, I'll tell you the name now, Juana Maria. Was her name. They call her the Lost Woman. She spent like all her life on an island alone. They tried to figure out how to communicate with her using the islanders that had moved away from that island years ago. They couldn't understand her because so much time had passed that they had adopted new way of talking, language and whatnot. And they wouldn't understand her. Well, they tried to bring someone from a further island in to see if they could communicate to find out what the secret that unlocks the story of how she ended up being alone. And it turns out that he couldn't do it either. That native that came from another, within 7 weeks, roughly thereabouts, Juana Maria died. According to the story, she actually was eating good food now, but it didn't work with her system. Something happened, and she passed away. They gave her a Christian burial. The padre, did the whole Christian
Catholic,
thing. And so she was buried there. They've penned many books about the story. I found it fascinating. Did you know about it?
No, I had never heard about it. I know what the Channel Islands are.
Okay.
And I did know that there's some controversy. I know some folks think that maybe the Chumash Native Americans might be descendants of some of the original indigenous peoples, but they're not really certain. The Chumash did live on the islands, some of the islands, not all of them, of course. But the Channel Islands are like Santa Catalina, San Nicolas, Santa Barbara, San Clemente, Santa Rosa. And they're not that far off the California coast. But I had never heard that story about her. And that's kind of I don't know what to say, man. That's an interesting sidestep.
They even took a picture of her in the 1800s. So there's an actual
they did. There's a photo of her.
Yeah, because this happened in the mid 18, like right where photography was available. And in the 30s, 1930s, in the 1930s, they actually went there and found her hut where all the thatch had gone, but the bones were still covering and whatnot. So it's like the key to this whole thing is that this is a lady that survived on her own for who knows how many 30, 40, 50 years of her life. Maybe she was a little kid. How did she survive all alone on that island is what people were asking. And at the end of the day, all the people from that island were drawn away from there because of X reasons. This journey of the people of those islands started in the 1500s and ended in the mid 1800s. And the story is still going strong because of the will of survival of a human being,
Yeah. Wow. I need to dig into this seriously because that is fascinating to me. I'm kind of looking a little bit at it now, and her Native American name is unknown. They called her Juana Maria. Yeah. And she died in 1853. Wow.
Which is
really something.
If you think about 1853, who knows how old she was, but it is a long way back. But at the same time, doing all the genealogy stuff,
it's not that far.
It's not that far because it would put me like to my great grandfather, roughly thereabouts, which sounds far anyhow. But if you're looking at genealogy, you know that it's not that far.
No, it's not. It's not that far back. I mean, 1853. It sounds ancient to us, but it's not. Well, it's 166 years ago, so nobody living then is alive today.
Yeah,
but you only have to go back maybe 2 generations. I mean, your grandfather may have known people who were around at that time.
Yeah, especially when he was young.
Yeah. And I know my great-grandfather very possibly could have. I mean, his parents. But it's not. Yeah. Wow, that's cool. I'm gonna have to check into this because this is an interesting story. And you know what? I like stuff like this. This kind of stuff fascinates me. And
I think it is fascinating. Yeah.
I mean, I'm reading this little bit of a blurb around here. It's believed that the people who massacred the Native Americans who lived on the Native Islanders there, the people who massacred them were Native Alaskans
Yeah.
who were down there, you know, hunting otters.
Hmm.
So it's not like the evil Europeans came along and did it. This is, Native Alaskans. So I don't know, man. I'm gonna have to dig into that story. That's very cool.
Let
That's
let
very
me
cool.
mention another thing that I saw.
Okay.
Talking about evil Europeans and slaughter.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw a documentary because I've not gone into this whole thing. Just as a backdrop, being American, born in America, but you have a very recent migration. There's a whole story, a whole world of where one comes from and all that. That in my case, yes, you hear your folks talking, your great grandfather, your grandfather, this and that, but you're not really paying attention. You're more interested in like the Thundercats, G.I. Joe, and life
Sure.
as it is, and so on and so forth. But as you get older, you start to, some folks, I do for sure, start to reflect on everything from the past, especially when you don't have your ties alive,
Yeah.
to be able to reach out and say, hey pops, X, Y, and Z, how's that work? Or who was this person? I don't have that anymore. So I
Right.
have to, so basically do the research that I've been doing. Well, in the northern part of Spain, Cantabria, um, generally speaking, all I understood of it is that it's the north of Spain and X, Y, and Z, and that's what it is. But I saw this documentary on YouTube as well, and originally you had people there that were from the Celtics in that whole area, and this is all, by the way, documented very much so, that dominated the north of Spain. And
Okay.
these people lived there disconnected from anything else. Well, during the introduction of Roman expansion into Europe, which eventually went into England, they went into Germany, and so on and so forth.
Right.
They would take over traditionally what the Romans wanted total control. Well, they would come into an area, they would take it over, and then their citizens, they would give, or I'm sorry, their captives, they would give the privilege of becoming Roman citizens, which was smart because then those people would feel like they were integral to the community, and okay, we'll go with it because you're not going to kill me. I get all rights that citizens have. You have swords, so I'm not going to mess with you. It's a win-win situation, really. I'd prefer to be left alone, but frankly, if we're going to have the same rights, let's do this thing. Well, when they went through Spain, and there was other situations in Germany and England, by the way, but I'm talking about the documentary that I saw. They went up into Spain and they went conquering. And the peoples, to some degree, lesser degree, they would eventually say, okay, fine. And so Roman expansion and conquering of Spain, Hispania, was being done. When they reached the north of Spain, those people of Celtic, derived of Celtic stock, didn't accept
Right.
at all. And for 200 years, they actually fought the Romans. It was the only place in Spain where that occurred for 200 years. Augustus, through all the famous, they fought there to take control of that part of Spain. These people were of such savagery in the writings of the Romans that they went and would attack without any regard for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The women would slaughter their kids when they felt that they were being encroached on,
Yep.
and then would attack and be killed themselves along with the men. They would prefer for 200 years to actually die completely before being taken control over by the Romans, which the Romans offered them many times. We're not going to mess with you. Just, submit to us.
Mm-hmm.
We just, and you'll become, they weren't having it. These are people from the mountains. Well, it took 200 years. And within those 200 years, the Romans just overwhelmed those people to the point that they were decimated.
Mm-hmm.
And by decimated, in the history books, they say that they were wiped out. Man, woman, child, like completely obliterated.
Gone.
With-
Yes.
within that, you had other tribes of Celtics, and they call them Iberian Celts.
Right.
With with that said, other parts of that northern Spain, they did submit. But in that center part of Cantabria, which is where my family comes from on my father's side, they wouldn't, and so they all died out. The will of people, regardless of loss of life, to not be under the yoke of another, is a theme that fascinates me, because to me, there's nothing grander than freedom.
Right.
At all costs. We want to live, but
Right.
we demand freedom, and in America we demand, representation,
Yeah. Well,
without representation, without being able to speak, without being able to think and act and live our lives. So the whole human experience to me is a fascinating experience when it
right.
comes to freedom for the individual. And yeah, I saw that documentary and it was pretty badass.
Well, something very, very similar happened but it was towards the end of the Roman Empire, and I don't mean like the last week or two, but it was towards the end of the Roman Empire when they invaded what is now the United Kingdom. The Romans never took Scotland.
Mm-mm.
They never got they got a little bit into
They got
Scotland,
England,
but not very far.
They had Hadrian's Wall dividing the Picts.
The Hadrian's Wall, but then north of that, they had the Antonine Wall. And the Antonine Wall was there basically to kind of slow them down, because the Celts would raid down from Scotland and just create their own havoc. But Antonine's Wall was begun way after Hadrian's Wall. Hadrian's Wall was like 122 AD, and I think Antonine was like 140 or something like that. It was later. It was a few years later. But basically, it was just try to slow them down. The Romans never took Scotland. Was the point on that? Because they too were more willing to die than to surrender or submit. And that was just all there was to it. So I know exactly the kind of thing that you're talking about.
Now they do find it's that same spirit. It's that spirit of hey, guess what? You're not going to try. It's the same spirit that we're talking about that you see, in my opinion. And frankly, this is my opinion, and I believe it. It's my reality. It's the same spirit that you see with the lone or the family out west in America in the early 1800s, or building a place for themselves and saying, and this is our land that we will cultivate and we will survive. That spirit, that human spirit, to me, it's the most dignified representation of the human spirit.
It was just rugged individualism in that I want to be left alone so I can take care of myself and provide for my family, and that's it.
Yeah.
Just basically I want to be left alone and sink or swim based on my skills, knowledge, ability, and my willingness to put in the work to do so. I mean, it's it's strange to say it, but when we think about, that kind of a spirit, the westward pioneers, which some of my ancestors were, it sounds like a joke, but it is the case. If you're working your way across the Great Plains and your wagon broke down, lost a wheel or something like that, and you were too dumb or too lazy to fix it, that's just where you stayed.
Yeah.
And up to right now, anywhere we find a nice spread here in America, we find a nice ranch, nice house on a nice piece of land. As a symbol of that, we've got two broken wagon wheels out front by the mailbox. It sounds like a joke, but it is the case, because It was just self-sufficiency, make it on your own. And you and I have had this discussion several times before. Basically, you are one generation away from that oppression. You are one generation away from the seizing of property. And what was once yours is now ours. Your father had to flee the only home he knew to keep from being put up against a wall and getting shot. That's not something out of a book. That's not something somebody saw in a movie and told you about. That was your dad.
Yeah.
So when you sit there and say that that's fascinating to you, you have a very deep connection to that. So I would be absolutely shocked if it wasn't.
Well, at the same time, it's weird, but like I mentioned before, so being so close to that and hearing it all the time growing up, I was at the same time completely detached because those things were lessons that were in my brain. But you're thinking, oh, look at this new album from Metallica. As you're growing, you're not. So as a kid, all you're thinking about is like, wow,
True.
check out Little Debbie over there, or hey,
And
and you're not thinking in terms of like we must emancipate and we must,
no, that's
thinking all
true.
these things.
Your parents kind of shielded you from a lot of that, but you weren't stupid either. You know why your father was arrested
Oh yeah,
twice. You
yeah,
know that, what was going on. You heard the conversations and everything. Well, you can't take that in without it kind of becoming a part of you. I
oh
mean,
yeah, yeah, definitely.
and that's just,
I mean,
uh,
just recently, I found some more documentation that I have to translate. There's articles in the paper that he
mhm,
penned
yeah,
in relation to the situation back in the '60s and all that. I have to
yeah,
sit and translate all that stuff.
right.
But if you're interested in hearing more about that, we have an episode going back, which I think
Oh,
was
yeah.
called Eloy's
Eloy,
Revolutionary Route.
Eloy's Revolutionary Roots, exactly. And it's an excellent episode. It's a great episode. And it just woke my brain right up. And I was like, hot damn.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
It is, but I mean, it's not crazy. I mean, we are getting dangerously close to politics here, which is something that I really want to avoid. But you when you talk about the differences between Juana Maria being basically rescued from the island, and that's how they phrase it in all the articles that I'm seeing right here. She was rescued from that island and then brought to other islands with other people
Yeah,
whom they mistakenly thought were more of quote unquote her kind.
right.
There's a huge difference between that and the people who wiped out everybody and everything she ever knew. I mean, she didn't stay in that whalebone and thatch shack because she liked it. That was her only existence. That was the only existence she knew.
Right.
She knew there were other people out there, but it's wow.
Well,
I've
I
got to
want
get
to.
into that story.
We have talked about this before, though. Yeah. Oh, you know what? I saw it. I'm gonna link it in here in the thing. I gotta find it sometime during this
Mhm.
conversation. But we did one time get into the conversation of if you were a guy from back in the day and you had the opportunity to come to the future. Like if they asked you right now, listen, Mark, can we listen? Listen, Mark. You have the ability. We are gonna take. If you choose to, we'll take you into the future, and there's all this cool stuff, dude. Now they don't tell you, and let's say you don't, but is it look, dude? There's all this good stuff. Come with us. You can't go back to this current time, but come with us. We got some awesome stuff, okay, dude? And so, what would you do? What would you do?
My 20-year-old self says go. My 58-year-old self says I'm happy right here.
Okay,
My 58-year-old self says I'm warm and cozy in a pile of excrement, so don't make waves. Everything I know, everything I love is right here. And
okay,
I don't need that adventure. Now, if I was 20, 19, 21, something like that,
mhm.
I'd be on it like white on rice.
Okay. All right, fair enough.
Yeah,
So
because there's still time to learn. There's still time to see what there is to see. You know what I
so
mean?
now, so let's sort of throw something in the mix there. So if you were Mark Lindsay with all the knowledge you have now, and you were put back in the say 1800s, and you have all the knowledge, but you're just there. This is hypothetical. I get
Okay,
it, and
sure.
you know, and someone came to you from our time and said, "Hey, Mark, dude, I know you're kind of stuck here in the 1800s and stuff. I don't know if you miss the internet. I don't know if you miss like air conditioning, if you miss all these awesome things. I know you don't go to the movies a lot, Mark, but we got movie theaters. You remember those. You want to come with us. Do you think a person from the 1800s would be better off, barring, the fact that they know or don't know today than they would be back then?
Young people, yes. Older people, I don't think so. And I can only go by this is pretty subjective, my opinion.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to be transported back or forward anyway. Now, if I was 18, 19, 20, 21, yeah, I'd be all over it.
Yeah, I get you, dude.
There are
It's like
certain people that I would want to go back to talk to if I could,
this is home base.
Yeah. I would want to go back to the 1700s in Maryland and try to find my ancestors, my true ancestors, and try to get the real story, Could I survive? I don't know. I might end up chopping wood on somebody's farm,
I'll tell you what. If you went back to that time, I don't know about you, but I'd be pretty teed off with nighttime because the candles come out and there's no AC. I mean, I guess you're up north, but like hell, I like my air. I'm with you on what you said earlier. I like my AC.
Yeah.
I like my refrigerator. Now, I don't appreciate it as much as I should, but I
Right.
like them enough to think, screw that, although I would like to visit.
But again, having the knowledge I have now, we know to boil water so we don't get diphtheria, or not diphtheria. Oh my God, the other one that comes along with filthy water, cholera.
Cholera.
We know to boil water so we don't get cholera. We know, I know enough hand tool. I know how to work with hand tools enough to know. I don't want to, but we know enough to get by. I could go to work in a cabinet shop or something like that. And what I'm weak on, I would get strong on very quickly. I would have to survive. But having the knowledge we have now, I don't know if physically I could survive because we are soft. We are spoiled. We're used to having safe drinking water and indoor plumbing. We're used to having the fridge. And I don't know. I think the 24/7 entertainment of the internet, it would be tough at first, but I could get used to it because I am an avid reader. I do like to read as a form of entertainment. So while the language we use today is different than they used back then in the late 1700s, I think I would grow accustomed to it. See, I just said that instead of saying I think I'd get used to it. But
Well, maybe they wouldn't say. See, look, so we know the way people spoke back then because it's not that far away from us right now. Right. For people that are into history and all that, you get a sense, and depending on what level you're at, you get a sense that, well, it's not that far away from where we're at now. But we do understand that from where we're at now to then, there have been drastic changes in the way we speak and the words that we have been introduced in this, century and so on and so forth. Do you think that you would be picked if you were dressed just like them? And not that you keep your mouth shut, but if you spoke up and had a conversation with a dude, In fact, I think that I could get away with dude out west.
Actually, it came from back east, but yeah, you could get away with dude.
Now, if it's
But it just
excessive,
means something. It just meant something different. What it meant was somebody who was dressed fancy. They were a
oh,
dude. They were, and that's where the duded up came from. You were getting in your Sunday best, it was somebody who was fancy and maybe a little bit weak, not used to chopping wood and things like that. Couldn't, obviously they could ride a horse because everybody rode horses back then. But
yeah,
maybe you couldn't handle a 8-horse team, or you wouldn't hitch your own wagon because you were used to having somebody else do that for you. You just climbed up in the seat and off you went. But it was seen as somebody who was kind of he's all fancy and everything. That was a dude. But
so
yeah, I can't see people in the 17 or 1800s, and it would happen, adopting our mannerisms, our
mhm,
current mannerisms and our current slang. I
mhm.
mean, can you imagine going into a store in, pick a city, in 1788 and saying, 14 pence? Cool. Cool didn't even come along until the 20th century,
Yeah,
meaning
cool.
something good.
And it's
Yeah.
very in use, very much a part
Oh
of
yeah.
our right. Oh, that's so
Oh yeah.
cool. Well, what the hell do you mean, son? What are you
Hmm.
talking about? It's hotter than heck out here. Um,
Exactly.
sir, it's just fantastic. I don't know. Now, get a hold of yourself, Sonny.
Yeah.
You know,
But it came about in that 1920s, 30s era from jazz. I mean, and a lot of our slang came from that era, and we don't even realize it. But a lot of it fell out of favor. I mean, nobody really uses a lot of that. I mean, when was the last time you heard anybody say 23 skidoo at all? Most folks wouldn't even know what the hell it meant, but we still use a lot of those words.
yeah. So, do you think that you would pass as far? So, do you think you could have a conversation and pass as not abnormal
No,
back then?
no, I would be seen as a foreigner for sure, just simply because the way we speak.
And how about your glasses? Like I did say you'd be dressed, but you need to see. So if they looked at your glasses, they are so thin. They would have to have back then. I bet you they look at your glasses and they're like, "This guy's from the future. He's from planet Neptune Nebulae 9."
But see,
Because
they didn't. But Neptune hadn't been discovered back then. I don't think.
so throw both of them in jail. We're having an inquisition in this town. Both of
But
these cats are screwed up. Oh, I guess I'm in the inquisition because I just used the word cat.
that's right. What the hell are you talking about?
Your Honor, I swear to you, I didn't mean it. Son, you used the word cat.
That's it. Are you saying that this is a feline? No. I'm saying he's a dude.
So for those of you listening to this entertaining podcast, so we just dropped a link because we're doing this live on YouTube, on our YouTube Trampled Underfoot podcast YouTube channel. And well, we had who was it that asked I think it was Frankie CNC and Woodworking had asked, "Oh, can you drop a link about Juana Maria and the adventure of that lone survivor on that island off the west coast of California?" So I dropped that link there. You can also find that link in our Facebook page, Trampled Underfoot Podcast Facebook page.
That's right.
So just letting you guys know about that.
And I'll try to get it into the description of this video after it becomes a video. And maybe this time I will remember it. So,
I thought you would find that one interesting because I know that you like adventure
yeah,
as well.
that's to me, that things like that are fascinating, and I'm going to have to dig into it. I only wish I knew more about it now, because it would make for a very cool discussion. I like to know what I'm talking about when I talk about stuff like that. But I tried kind of sort of along the same lines. I tried a little thing over the last couple of weeks where I was trying to blow Eloy's mind with some strange little fact or what have you. And it just wasn't panning out because just about every one of them I thought would just blow his mind. He was like, "Meh, okay, fine."
No,
So, you
sometimes
know,
let me just
I get you.
What do you mean you get in my defense?
No,
Okay.
no, I'm not saying that. It's just to me, it was mind blowing, but to you, it was like, okay, yeah, heard it, been there, done that, got the T-shirt. Next, and you know, so I've kind of decided to back off of that. But there is one thing that kind of sort of dovetails into where we went right
Okay.
now. All right,
All right.
that I brought up a few days ago on my computer screen, and I thought, well, that's pretty cool.
Okay.
I wonder if that would blow his mind. So this is not to try to blow his mind. This is just something that's out there. All right. Now I got to take you back. We're talking time travel here. Get in your mind the Great Pyramids. Okay. In ancient Egypt. Then get in your mind Cleopatra, Queen of the Nile. Now get in your mind Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walking on the moon.
You're not going to like what I thought, but go ahead. I see Stanley Kubrick.
Nope, nothing like that.
Moon landing.
This is
Egypt.
this is, you know, how kind of a demonstration about how it's not all that far back.
Okay.
Cleopatra lived closer to the time we walked on the moon than she did to the construction of the Great Pyramids.
It's amazing.
The Great Pyramids, the first one was built 2,500 years before she was born. And this year, the moon landing happened 1,900 years after she was born. So she lived closer to walking on the moon than the construction of the Great Pyramids.
Wow. Yeah.
That kind of stuff. I mean, it's nothing earth shattering. It's nothing earth shaking, but it's like, are you kidding me? Because I don't know about you, but to me, when I picture something like that, I picture pyramids still under construction.
During Cleopatra's time?
Yeah.
I picture the later examples possibly being topped off or finished off, but the earlier ones not, is what I picture.
Right.
Because you know that there's an earlier civilization that came through and built upon the older one. And nobody knows what the heck happened there.
Right. And maybe 3 of those had been built, but they were still working on other stuff. That's what goes into my mind when I think ancient Egypt in Cleopatra's time. Because, you know, it's not like they went, okay, job done. What do we do now? Let's go get coffee.
Yeah.
You know, that was stuff was continued. I mean, you know, construction was still done out in the Valley of the Kings for every pharaoh, for every leader that was to be buried out there. So there was still things going on, but it was just weird to think that she lived closer to the time of the moon landing than she did to the time of the construction of the Great Pyramid.
It is totally insane to think of. Human history, I mean, it's amazing to me that we have what we have anyhow. Because if you look at our situation, it's a difficult job to go back in time if you're doing some sort of ancestry thing, let's say, and attach your family members. And when I say it's a difficult job, this is relative because we do have the ability to use the computer to put them all in this neat program with little boxes, all their information in it. People in the past had to write all these things on parchment or whatever the heck they used, or in books with everything written out. And it's amazing to me that we, going back, have as much information society-wise and individual-wise as we do anyhow. I know things get blurry for families. Well, it can get blurry within 1 or 2 generations, but in general, people can actually reach back into the 1500s, and something happened worldwide or European-wide. Something happened within the 15, 14, 13 thereabouts, those centuries, where you had an exponential amount of information starting to be recorded
Mhm.
as
The
opposed
Renaissance.
to before.
Mhm.
And so we do see a lot of documents from that you can access with your last name and so on. But things do get blurry going back. It's
Mhm.
amazing to me we can document what we can anyhow.
Yeah, and you figure most of the population, most folks can't even get back that far. Most folks can't get past a great-grandfather because a lot of people just aren't interested, and that's the main problem. But then again, it's not a problem if you're not interested in it, because why would it be?
I don't think it. So I just want to state this for the record for the future.
Mhm.
Maybe not so much for the folks. To me,
Mhm.
as I get older, I realize, and I always kind of had the thing, but the idea, I realize, you know, to me, the most important thing is particularly now that I can't reach out to them, is the people that are my family that are
Mhm.
no longer alive. These people basically were the world that was created from them to me. I have now
Right.
the ability to create my own world and my own experiences, which I do, but I have a lingering and always have a lingering um, nostalgia
Mhm.
and hunger for knowledge. Not that I'm saying anything other than that. It's just simply that's the way I'm put together. I
Yeah.
want to know.
Yeah.
Stubbornly, I want to know. I want to know. I want to know.
Yeah.
Um, so it's important to me because of that. I think it's one of the most important things. It
Yeah.
grounds you, and oh, this is the generations that what were their struggles, what were their. I find it very ultimately important in my opinion.
And they are to me too, because as we've said several times before, if those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. I mean, it's a cliche to say that, but the only way to really, I think personally, my opinion, the only way I can really figure out who the hell I am is to know where I came from and the kind of people that I came from. And there's nothing rich and famous about any of these people. They were subsistence farmers. I
Yeah.
mean, they were farmers, they were tanners. They One ran a hotel in his old age because it was a way to get money without lot of physical labor. So these are just working class folks. And it the struggles they had back then may seem, I don't know, outdated, antique, and kind of, in some respects, trivial to us, but just something as simple as receiving a letter was a huge deal to them. There were people who were actually afraid of getting mail because it usually only brought bad news.
Hmm.
So we don't even think about that anymore. I mean, I don't know how many times a week you check your mailbox.
Oh, by the way, I do. I don't think of anything that comes through the mail as good news
Yeah.
currently.
Well, like I say, I don't know how many times a week you check your mailbox, but I check mine on Sunday morning
Oh, so
because I
you're
know it's going to get filled
yeah.
over
Yep.
the course of the week with a lot of stuff I'm going to put in the recycling bin before I ever walk back into the house. And this is an open message to the folks at Dish TV and AARP. Number one, I'm 58. I'm not AARP age yet. And number two, Dish TV, thanks, but no thanks. And I'm being diplomatic about that.
Oh, you know what, Mark? I'm with you, and I'll tell you. I'll go a step further. For all you people out there that are in this, I guess, business of sending out useless, meaningless mail, trying to what acquire from us some sort of deal where we pay money to your little proposed, be it newspaper or letter or new product or whatever. I can't wait till all of you are out of a job in 10, 15 years when everything is so internet or so away from that you're done. No more of that crap. Because honestly, you are polluting the earth with useless, nonsense and killing trees. There is the only place I would say the killing of trees is that, you know, it's It's an abuse. It to me. You guys should.
It's a waste of a resource. Yeah. I'm with you. I saw the absolute one of the funniest memes I've seen in the last couple of months was, you remember that big hyped up thing about the Area 51 raid?
Yep.
Let's raid Area 51. They can't get all of us. Well, number one, they're the US military. Yes, they can. That's kind of what they do.
Yeah.
But I saw a great meme the other day, well, a couple months back, where it was like, forget about Area 51. Let's find those people that are offering me a vehicle warranty and raid that joint.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still getting, your warranty is about to expire on a car I sold 7 years ago. You know, it's like, dude, get over it. I'm already over it. It's gone. I don't want your warranty.
Well, I'll tell you what. Up until like last year,
Uh-huh.
and by the way, I don't know why it was so prominent last year, but the newspaper, I'm not going to name the name, they kept tossing free papers on my lawn. Sometimes the guy would miss. No, not sometimes. Most of the time, land in the parking spot. When it rained, it would fill in the, that plastic liner that the paper comes in. The rain would push in. It would break away the paper, and you'd have this soggy pancake, and that was a year of that and going back in time. Well, nobody's going to read your stupid paper no more. So, because guess what? I can find your information and even more of that your paper offers online at my disposal when I choose to type in and search. So this year, I guess they got the message, because I don't see any of that going on. But for a while, oh yeah.
See, now I'm the kind of guy, I can't waste an opportunity like that, man. I would have to call up the paper and say, tell your guy to stop delivering the free paper. I don't want your paper, and I'm not going to get a subscription. And the reason I'm not going to get a subscription is because the guy who's delivering me the free newspaper can't even hit my damn porch. Why would I want to go dig the paper I paid for out of a mud puddle?
Yeah.
Hell no. He can't put that on my porch. What makes you think I want to pay for that?
Yeah.
No,
that's actually a good
one. No thanks.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. And I will let pass the people that put the little rubber band. I don't know if they do that in your area, but this is such a congested area that a company will hire a guy or two, guy or gal or two, and they'll give them a stack of like pamphlets of be it a new Chinese joint or burger joint or whatever, with a rubber band stapled to it, and they'll walk around and they'll hang it on your fence and keep going. And so if I didn't go through and pull those, my fence would be like a Christmas tree full of those.
Yeah.
I don't believe them.
Really.
It's a business. They're saying, hey, we're a business. Okay. But
sure.
Newspapers, no, man. No.
And then some kid or some guy is making a little extra coin, putting them on people's doorknobs and stuff. We get them around here. Yeah. We get a company that comes through. We can replace your windows for $3,500 for the whole house. Yeah, I've seen some of your work. Get away from my house. I don't want you on my porch. I don't often acknowledge the chat out there, and I really, really should. But we've got some people making some comments out here. Frankie CNC Woodworking Channel just says, I just got a phone book in the mail yesterday. Remember getting the phone book being a big thing?
Mm-hmm.
I loved getting the phone book, man. It was fantastic. And the first thing I did was looked up to see how they spelled my dad's name. Did he get the number one? Did they get it right? Mm-hmm. Number two, did they use the full name or did they just use first initial? Then you start going through the yellow pages to see the cool stuff that just opened up. That in various categories. I mean, I would spend, I'm not kidding you. I'd see the phone book on the front porch. I'd take it in the house and I'd spend 2 hours with it.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't that into it. I would check for our name. And then that's it. And then I'd put it off to the side. But every house had the phone book sitting there day in, day out, forever and ever. And you'd refer to it if you were looking for someone. So it was worth, as a business, let's say, putting your name in there when that thing came out. Yeah. They had the white pages and the yellow pages.
Yep.
And I mean, I'll tell you what.
I dug it.
We're far removed from those times, I'll tell you.
Daniel Haryu out here in the chat says, I love free papers. It's good for starting fires, covering workbenches, and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, well, but for starting fires, I mean, just a little bit of hand sanitizer and a propane torch. Google it.
Oh, nice. Right. The Anarchist Cookbook.
No, absolutely not. We had a pellet stove. Last house we lived in Nevada, and it had an electronic igniter in it, and they were notorious for burning out, and it lasted about a year and it burned out. Well, you could go down and you could buy pellet stove lighter fuel, and it was gelled alcohol, and it was like at that time, so we're talking 2007, 2008, it was like $8 for a quart. Then suddenly I thought, wait a minute, it's gelled alcohol. I went and got some hand sanitizer, which is gelled alcohol. Couple of squirts on that pellet stove, drop a match in it, and it don't poof like gasoline or anything. You put the match down and it lights like charcoal lighter fluid. Boom. Done.
Nice.
It's the same stuff for like 60 cents a pint. You know. I use a propane torch for everything. So not everything, but if I gotta get a fire lit, one of those cheap weed burner torches from Harbor Freight, it'll light that barbecue right stinking now, mister. You ain't waiting around. So
I was gonna ask you, going back to the 1800s bit, when was it that folks got the notion? Because when you travel from one place to the other, there's altitude changes, when officially did people figure on, we can dig down in this area that seems barren or lacking in water and find water? Can we point to a time in history where wells and the idea of wells are like, oh yeah, of course, this is this is how wells, of course we can. How did people figure in the 1800s? I mean, there had to be a lot of hit and miss.
Yeah, there was probably some of that too. I would imagine that African tribes knew about that back in prehistory.
Digging wells?
Or looking forward. You've got me wondering now. I'm wondering about, it's got to be before Romans and Greek times. It's got to be prehistoric. But, and then again, there were also ways of using animals. If you followed animal trails, you will usually find water because animals have to have water.
I don't even know how to ask that question to the Google, but I'll ask it like, when did man first start digging wells? I'm sure it's going to be ancient.
Yeah, it's going to be way, way, way back. I'm sure. Prehistory.
So the answer is the first document in America, the first documented spring pole well in America was drilled in 1806 by David and Joseph Ruffner in West Virginia. It reached 58 feet in depth, containing 40 feet of bedrock. But that doesn't tell us. We'd have to go deeper into that. But there were wells in the Middle East and Europe and Africa and all over the place. So.
Well, and that's where, the aqueducts and channeling water and digging ditches, etc. I mean, they were doing that way, way, way back. And, in ancient Egypt and before. So they knew they had to have water to make plants grow and to feed them, take care of themselves and to take care of animals and whatnot.
I don't know, but I don't know that it's a self-evident thing to assume. So if you put me like on this planet and like whatever, and I'm sitting in it does not occur to me that if I dig down deep enough, I'm gonna find water. It's not self-apparent
because it's not something you've ever had to concern yourself with. If you had to have that water to save your very life, it would start becoming a little bit more apparent. I mean, and humans learn from observation. Yeah, okay, there's a creek, there's a stream, there's a river, so water's flowing on the surface there.
That's what I
But
think.
where is this water coming from in between this big rock outcropping? It's just coming up out of the ground. That must mean there is water in the ground. You
Mm,
know? So I don't know. I'm trying to put my brain back into prehistory, and some folks would say that I'm still stuck there, but it seems to me that humans learn by observation and by trial and error. So it's looking for certain signs that are associated with a spring that
okay.
might lead to water. Let's dig here and see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying it's so if I ran across the source of it coming out of a bunch of rocks, I guess I would think to myself, damn, that's coming out like
Yeah,
excluding all other knowledge that we have. Like if I'm just like a babe in the woods, no
right.
pun intended, and I look at that, I'm gonna think, well, okay, it's coming from in there. But the leap from in there to in on the going down in the ground is a big leap. Not a big leap, but it's big enough where like, okay, so maybe if I dig down enough, it's a tough thing for just out of the blue for a human being. There has to be some sort of reasoning behind that, or was it just knowledge that was passed on?
I mean, who knows? Who knows? I mean, who was the first person to discover that by rubbing two dry sticks from the same tree, from the same branch together, you could create fire? Who knows?
That's true. Well, maybe somebody that was bored and just because
You
there's
know?
no internet, so you might as well rub two sticks together, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. That was before they discovered. No, they discovered hitting stuff with them first. So
Mark, it without internet, um, I could wake up in the morning and say, well, today I'm just gonna rub two sticks together all day, and then the sun will come down, and then I'll sleep, and I'll do it again tomorrow.
and hopefully you'll stay warm. Then that's what it was. Let me rub these two sticks together. I'll keep warm that way. And all of a sudden, poof, look at this. Oh
Oh yeah,
man.
Mark. They said, "Holy smokes!" and they said, "No pun
Oh.
intended."
Oh.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, yeah, well, what can you say?
Oh man, you know what? We should laugh because they knew a whole lot that we don't know. And the funny thing is, they should have written it down and said, "Hey, by the way, in the year like like in the year 10,000 BC, I, Hiroshio rock weather eater, on this rock have imprinted the fact that I discovered, well digging, and the reason for it was my village needed more water to create more whiskey." It
Well,
it would have been better.
but it's history repeating itself over and over again because people didn't know how to read or write.
Yeah,
So they didn't know how to write things down. So all this stuff was passed down verbally.
yeah.
And then you had things like, well, Genghis Khan and the Mongol hordes slaughtering entire civilizations. It's not like they came to your town and said, join us or die. They rode through your town, killing everything that could possibly defend itself, took a few of the women, slaughtered the rest, took all the good stuff, and then went on to the next town. So all of their traditions, stories, all their knowledge is gone. I mean, just literally with the swing of a sword. Because, I mean, there were hundreds of thousands of these guys just in just big, broad swaths, just taking out anything that moved.
How far did
So,
they
well, all into Western Europe. They tried to take over everything. But, eventually they got beaten back when the Khan died. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about ancestry and DNA in Western China, close toward the dividing line between Europe and Asia. And I don't remember where I read this, and it was recently. They can trace 8% of the male population in Western China has a common ancestor. 8% of the population, of the male population. And they can trace that back through DNA studies.
Yeah.
So they were some busy individuals, but the Khan had like 500 wives. So, 600, something like that.
That's a
Yeah.
good tool for repopulation.
Well, yeah. I mean,
It's a it's a busy. I don't know when he found time to fight, because so
well,
you could say he was more of a lover than a fighter.
well, he was quite a bit of both when you think about it. I mean, the man had 600 wives, but it's also not like he was leading the charge. He had guys doing it for him.
Oh,
But so, no, I mean the fighting. He had guys doing that for. He might have had guys doing the other part too.
Yeah. Okay, guys, I know you're my troops, but I can't handle this horde, so I'm going to actually fight the other horde. We'll split the difference, all right, gentlemen?
Yeah, really.
So they went into Western, but they never went through into Eastern.
They went. Oh yeah, they went into Eastern Europe. Believe me.
Did they?
Oh no. Oh, you mean Eastern China?
No, Eastern Europe.
Oh yeah, they went into Eastern Europe.
Western Europe. I'm sorry.
Yes, they did. They got into Western Europe. Let's see. Let me look it up here.
Dates too. I'm curious about that if you can. That's an interesting side.
It's gonna take a little second. Genghis Khan in 1206 is when this was going on. He swept to take over the world. Swept across. Let's see. He swept across Asia, Hungary. He got into Hungary, Poland.
Dang.
Got into what is now modern day Germany, and he set his sights on Austria, then abruptly turned back.
Okay.
So let's see. He died in 1227. And let's see. He died just.
Wait a sec. Okay, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm also reading the side chat as you're informing us. And there's two comments. And by the way, for the listeners, come over to our YouTube page and like our page and share it around so that we can grow with your help. So I'm seeing, and you could leave comments while we're doing the live as well, which is cool. So Daniel Harju says 1200s, which you had mentioned 1200s, but then Jim Bashir says BC.
No, it was not BC.
Yeah,
no, it was not BC. It was AD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was confused with what,
Yeah. Yeah, he basically tried to sack the Austria-Hungary Empire. Austro-Hungarian Empire, excuse me. Good grief. He sacked Kiev in 1240, moved on to Hungary. In 1241, they sacked Budapest. Let's see. They went through modern day Serbia and were headed for Austria when they just finally turned around and went back.
Okay. Well, that's another area that I'd like to explore in more detail. I'll tell you this much with that said, because we were talking with Steve and stuff, and when I showed him the ancient DNA results, which I had also shared with you, and I did a whole video about it. It shows that I have Metal Age invaders, and then the description is that those Metal Age invaders come from the Russian steppe area, where it's the mountains that it's just a very impenetrable, and that's where like the Russian Asian. Well, there was a whole group of people that comprised of riders and metal workers that entered into Europe and then mixed with the European population. But just to be clear, the Genghis Khan situation we're speaking of is not that. That event that's from the ancient DNA mixture of people throughout Europe is an event that occurred back in history, say going back anywhere from 8,000 to 10,000 years ago. So it's an early event compared to this Genghis Khan, which is old as well,
Right.
but it's not that event that occurred. This
Well,
is a
what
separate deal.
well what happened was we got crossed conversations going. He was referring to the 1200 BC, the Phoenicians with the wells.
Okay.
That's as early as it's been traced back to 1200 BC
Oh,
with digging wells. So he just got back into this conversation after missing the other. See, that's why you got to pay attention.
yeah. Well,
So,
okay. So
and that was Jim Dockrell, not Jim Bashirs. I told him his name is Bashirs now, but
did you did you say or did I say Bashir's?
you did.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. See, I haven't seen Jim Bashir's in a while. So listen. So you're saying the Phoenicians, 12,000 BC, with
1200 BC.
1200 BC. Damn, 12,000 BC, 1200 BC with the wells. Okay, fair enough.
And
yeah.
And here's a just to kind of call back, just to kind of bring this all back into. That was still 1,300 years after they started building the Great Pyramids.
Holy smoke! Which part? The well part?
Yeah. So they started digging. The Phoenicians were digging wells in 1200 BC, but the Great Pyramids, they started building them in 2500 BC.
Okay, see, this is a subject that we're going to go ahead and leave for another time, because to be honest with you, it is so jaw-dropping what you just said.
Yeah.
That it's inconceivable just to allow it to slip in the head and just let it go. It is jaw-dropping to think of pyramids.
The Great Pyramids were built from 2550 to 2490 BC. Okay. So just roughly about 140, 150, 160 year period in there. Okay. And that was about it.
Yeah, that's I think that we can leave it on this note, because I think that we're good.
And they said there would be no math, which they obviously lied.
So, folks listening out there, we thank you for hanging out with us on this episode of Trampled Underfoot podcast. As we mentioned before, you can catch us on. I don't think we did, but you can catch us on Spreaker,
Right.
Trampled Underfoot podcast on Spreaker, as well as
all of your favorite podcast environments. We can now say that we're on iHeartRadio, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Google Podcasts, we are on all podcasting platforms. We're also over on Facebook with our Facebook page, Trampled Underfoot Podcast. Come on over there, throw us a thumbs up, make a show suggestion. If there's something you'd like to see us talk about, suggest it, and you never know, you might be the topic of discussion next week. Also, don't forget we have a website.
Oh yeah, trampledpodcast.com, which by the way is what is the word hosted, or is the word
Well, hosted is appropriate, but it's sponsored by Steve Nealon over at Harneil Media, the webmaster to the stars.
That's right. And if you'd like a really detailed website of your own, if you're a maker, or frankly, if you have interest in, it's a personalized relationship, and you can check out harneilmedia.com.
That's right. Steve does a good job. That's why I call him the webmaster to the stars. You know people who have a website through Harneil Media. All the better people do.
That's right.
Besides that, right here on our lost and lonely little lowly Trampled Underfoot podcast YouTube channel, we record these shows Tuesday evening at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. So come on by, hoot and holler with us over here in the live chat with Jim Dockrell / Bashirs, Daniel Haryu, Frankie CNC and Woodworking Channel,
Genghis Kong and the Phoenicians,
Billy Burt. You betcha. We have a good time out here, and we don't always get to talk to them. We get so involved in the conversation, but hey, anyway, we have a good time. So come join us. That's Trampled. Trampled Underfoot podcast on YouTube.
Later.
Take care.